Thank you for your interest in our graduate programs. This is going to be an incredible, informative session. Seth is going to, I have Seth Papac here with us, and he's going to be presenting jewelry and metalsmithing, and then we're going to open it up to questions. So I'm really here to just to support, to help moderate the Q&A after the presentation. So if you could do me a favor, though, whenever you have a question, put it in the Q&A chat box. So just a few icons to the right of where you told us where you're tuning in from. And then we'll open it up for discussion after that. I just don't want to lose track of any of those great questions you have. So once again, thank you all so much. Oh, my name is Maren, by the way. I work in admissions, and again, happy to be here. So, all right, well, Seth, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Maren.
Absolutely.
Welcome, everyone. As Maren said, my name is Seth Papac. I'm the Graduate Program Director in J&M at RISD. And my presentation today is really designed to sort of touch on the key points of information about the department, about curriculum, about funding. And I'm trying to be as comprehensive and concise as I can so that we have a lot of time for Q&A. So please put your questions in there, and I'm happy to leave hopefully a lot of time at the end to address any questions that might be lingering after the presentation. So J&M, the J&M program is undergraduate and graduate. We offer a 2-year MFA program and also a Post-Bacc, which is a one-year program where people basically build up their skill set to improve their portfolio. And so the majority of this presentation is really focused on the MFA program. If you have questions about the specifics around the Post-Bacc, I can talk a little bit more about that in the Q&A. Here's an overview of the curriculum for the MFA program, the 2-year program. I would say just in general, each term, I'll say a little bit about winter session. At RISD, there's this interesting term called winter session, which is a condensed term where students only take one course, and that's over 5 weeks. The other terms, fall and spring, are more traditional terms, 12-week terms. And in each of those terms, there are always 3 J&M required courses. So one of those courses is a seminar, and 2 of those courses are studio-based. The studio-based courses are typically taught or meet with students once a week, one day that one of those courses is scheduled. And then the other day is really left open for students to have a work day in the studio. The other credit requirements are various electives and graduate level seminars, which can be placed as a student sees fit in terms of like where they take those in the various terms throughout the 2 years. This is just a little bit about the Post-Bacc. As I said, the Post-Bacc is really geared more towards like a person building up their skill set so that they can have an improved portfolio for perhaps like applying to graduate school later on. So this is just an example of the courses that a student in the Post-Bacc program might take over their year. That includes it might include various electives that J&M offers, which a couple examples are electroforming and stones and gold. They also might be taking courses in different levels in terms of like sophomore, junior, senior level, as well as like perhaps a graduate seminar where the thinking and writing and speaking about work can be addressed at a higher level than perhaps in the undergraduate level. I do want to highlight that one thing that a lot of graduate students are interested in when they come to RISD is teaching, and our program offers opportunities for graduate students to teach. It is an assistantship where our graduate teachers in teams of 2 teach the introduction to jewelry courses. And part of my job as the graduate program director for J&M is really to offer like support and advising to graduate students in their assistantship positions. And one of those positions is as instructors. And so I observe teaching, I provide feedback, We work together before the term starts to build curriculum and assignments, and we talk about, you know, various teaching strategies, um, etc. So just an overview of faculty. I think one of the strengths of RISD's jewelry metalsmithing faculty, and one thing that like sort of sets it apart from any other jewelry or metalsmithing graduate program, is the number of faculty we have in the department. We have 3 full-time faculty, um, and we have anywhere from 6 to 10 part-time faculty. And there is no other program in the country, and maybe not at all anywhere else in the world, that has that many faculty that are accessible in various ways to graduate students. Timothy Vesky McMahon is one of our 3 full-time faculty members. He is right now the department head, and he's an associate professor. This is me. I'm the graduate program director and an associate professor as well. Tracy Steepy is currently on sabbatical, but she is a full professor, and she is typically the department head. This term, we have a full-time assistant professor term, Lauren Fensterstock, who's been a longtime faculty member in J&M in part-time roles, and this is the first year that she is teaching full-time with us, and we're very excited and happy about that. So along with those full-time faculty, as I said, there are between like 6 and 10 part-time faculty, and that really depends on the courses that are being taught and sort of like how people are moving around the country. If people are, for example, we have a faculty member who's doing a residency at an institution in Providence, and so they're teaching casting with us. So the faculty, the part-time faculty flexes somewhat a lot based on like what the courses are and who's available to teach those courses. We of course also have some senior critics in the department who've been in the department for 35 years. Johan van Oswegen and Noam Elyashev are people who've been in the department for a very long time. So we also have people who've been here for a very long time and sort of provide stability for the curriculum and the students in the department, along with the full-time faculty. So this is the hallway. J&M is in the Metcalf building. We occupy an entire floor. There's two rooms on this floor that aren't specifically J&M. They're a fine arts wood shop, which is next to the graduate studio room. And the fine arts wood shop, you have to take a 1-credit orientation, and then you can use that space and those tools for your entire time here. And that's really helpful, especially during thesis exhibition when you're building your exhibition. This is the graduate studio. So each student gets a bench and some storage next to their bench. There's a shared kitchen area, sink. There's a cabinet of shared tools. And in the department, of course, I'm going to go through the various studios, but there's also other tools that can be checked out. Each level in the department, so sophomores, juniors, seniors, grads, have a similar like dedicated studio space where they each have their own bench and storage. And the graduates are at one end of the hallway and the seniors are on the other. And we think of them as like the bookends of the department. They really like provide the model for the rest of the students. And we are very much a community, and the fact that we're like in close proximity and we have a whole floor really like allows us to support and have a very healthy community. So in terms of studio and equipment, we have a 3D printing room. So we have various types of 3D printing. One of the graduate assistant positions is a graduate student who's placed in the 3D printing area, who's basically in charge of like printing all of the files that come in from the various students, processing them and then delivering them to students. So that's an example of a graduate assistantship, which I'll talk about funding later, and I'll go into more detail about graduate assistantship funding. This is the enameling room / silicone various types of mold making in here, casting plastics, casting other materials. We have enameling kilns, we have vacuum forming machines, we have pressure pots for mold making, and we have like vacuum chamber. There's also some lapidary tools, various grinding machines and sanding machines, wet sanding machines in this area. This is the metalsmithing room. So we have an incredible collection of stakes and hammers, and some of these are over 100 years old. This room, like all the other studio rooms, are open to students who have been trained to use the tools and equipment in there. Graduate students are obviously coming in with various skill sets and might need specific training in areas. And one way that that happens is through our generous studio technician, Brian Bergeron, who is extremely knowledgeable. And so we do various orientations for students, but also another way that students can gain some experience and knowledge with tools or equipment or processes they're not familiar with is being a TA for an instructor. That's another form of assistantship that we offer. This is the machine room, which I'm actually in right now. So there's various like grinding machines in here, polishing, bandsaw, sandblasting. We have various CNC machines that are relatively new. This is we call it the 2D tech room. So we have laser welding in here. We have micro arc welding. We have a water jet cutter. We have a laser cutter. We have a UV printer. We have vinyl cutting machines and computers for people to work on Rhino or other 3D rendering software. Electroforming, as I said earlier, is a elective that we offer. It's a process that has been taught here for a very long time and was very much perfected by a longtime faculty member. And Brian Bergeron, our tech, is carrying on the legacy of this process in the department. And it's something that's like very fine-tuned and works extremely well in terms of like the quality of electroforming that occurs. This is becoming a more present process in relation to like 3D printing. Those two processes are really like, they go well together. And students are really utilizing those two processes together in terms of like building or creating more complex forms. This is the casting area. So we have electric vacuum casting. We have plastic centrifugal casting. There's water pressure cleaning machines. We have various like wax injection pots and rubber mold making materials for casting. We have a small wax room off the side of this room that has various wax working related tools and equipment. So that's facilities. It's important to highlight that in the department, we have formal reviews. So at midterm, there's a formal review at each level, and at the end of the term, there's a final review, and those are academic, formal points of evaluation. And we make a point of bringing in critics. The graduate students have critics at all midterm and final reviews. The undergrads have them typically at final review. So this year, the grad students at midterm review, their critic was Carrie Ann Quick, and they will have another critic at their final review. The other way that we bring in visitors is through artist lectures. So this term we had Lola Brooks come to give an artist lecture for the department, and those are open to the department as well as like the RISD community at large. So graduate funding, there's really three ways that graduate students receive support in terms of funding for attending RISD. And those three forms are graduate fellowship. Graduate fellowship is an amount of money that goes to reduce tuition. Every student who is admitted to the department receives graduate fellowship. That amount is determined outside of the department. It's determined by financial aid. And the amount that students receive really depend on the available funds, merit, and need. As I mentioned, another form of funding is graduate assistantship. So these positions are really employment. So you can you can choose to have a weekly paycheck given to you, or you can choose for the amount to go directly to reduce your tuition. So as I said, some of the examples of assistantship are graduate collaborative teaching, which are, as I said, graduates teach the introduction to jewelry course in teams of 2. Sometimes if a second year grad has extensive experience already teaching intro, and I or the other GPD feels comfortable placing that student alone in teaching, they will, but it's typically taught by a second year grad who's already taught it, who sort of mentors the first year grad, um, so that there's support beyond me. There's support in the classroom with the person who's already taught the course. There's faculty teaching assistant, as I mentioned, studio technician assistant. So that would be somebody who really supports our studio tech, Brian Bergeron, in terms of like upkeep of the department, tool maintenance, equipment maintenance. We typically place someone in the 2D room as a digital technical assistant to support students using the equipment in that room. And then, as I said, the 3D digital technical assistant is really in charge of making sure that the 3D printing is like moving consistently and people are receiving their prints. Other examples of assistantship placement are program assistant. So that's really someone placed to support me and the department head in terms of like preparing for artists, visiting lectures, posters, administrative work. And then sometimes we have special projects. So for example, we've been invited to exhibit at Munich Jewelry Week in March, and we've placed a graduate student to do a special project to sort of manage the planning and facilitation of an exhibition in Munich. The third source of funding is departmental scholarships. Those go towards undergraduates and graduates, and it's really based on merit and need. And so oftentimes those scholarships are follow the student through their time in the department. So if they're awarded to a junior, they also receive them in the senior year, and then they become available after that. So the availability of those is really dependent on if they've already been awarded and what's left, and then it's placed based on merit and need. I just want to check my time, and I'm just gonna go through some graduates, recent graduates of the department, along with obviously creating very like expressive work that's from a particular and individual perspective, you know, obviously in dialogue with like the history of jewelry, the history of body adornment, the history of the field. The one output is the actual physical work, but of course a huge part of that is like the research, the writing, and the speaking about the work. And so along with producing work and having a thesis exhibition, a thesis document is required, and we also require an artist book where that thesis document is thought of more creatively and put into a format that maybe mirrors some of the aspects of the student work. So this is Ali from last year, whose thesis title was Eco-Spiritual Entanglement. Matthew Freeman, Moving with Mountains. These works are carved stone and wood. Here's an example of an actual thesis book. So Yuki graduated last year as well, and her thesis was Of Dolls and Jewels, Keeping as a Strategy of Care and Belonging. So here's an example of like what part of the thesis book or artist book might look like. This will include like the thesis document, but also other text related to the work or relevant research. Urena Dye graduated in 2024. Here again is just some example of work. Her thesis was Naturify 2300. She was doing a lot of 3D printing and thinking about speculative nature in relation to like how it could interact with human beings. Valerie Ho, who's currently placed as a full-time teacher at the University of Oregon. Her thesis was called Root, and her work was a range of apparel-related items. This item, there was various stickers where you could play out various narratives on a shirt, scratch off pins or buttons. So there's, in terms of material and format and like relationship to the body, there's a huge range of work that's made in this department. But it's good to point out that it's important that our conversations are related to body related objects. We don't make sculpture. Sculpture is very different than what we do. But within this idea of body related objects, there's a wide range of materials and forms of engagement. Here's another example of a thesis artist book. This particular student, Dia, was making sort of garment jewelry hybrids. And so her artist book was put into the format of a magazine, a fashion magazine. So just some ideas about content. And here's another example of an artist book. This student was making work that was about production work and the value or non-value of production work or how it's perceived. Stephen KP is an alumni from 2020, still very active in the field, and all of these pieces are carved wood. And then Valerie James from 2019. Valerie was very much engaged with the process of engraving as a form of mark making, indicating time and labor. And then another example of an artist book and how content is sort of expressed in different ways in the artist book in terms of like imagery as well as text. And then MJ Tyson, who did a mix of sculptural objects, still body related, and also jewelry. And these pieces are made from objects collected from secondhand stores and then sort of melted into something new. That is my presentation. I hope I touched on many of the things that you're interested in. Please check out our Instagram at RISD_Jewelry Metalsmithing. And if you have questions besides today, you can email me at spapac@risd.edu.
Excellent. That was wonderful. Thank you so much, Seth. I was dropping a bunch of links along the way in the regular chat, but does anybody have any questions? I know there was a lot of great information, and please feel free to go ahead and enter them. I mean, I'll start us off with a question that I have, honestly. Like kind of a frequently asked question we get about from any prospective grad student is how do you find are jewelry and metalsmithing students able to kind of like use the other studios and collaborate with students in other departments, especially since you guys are in the Metcalf, which has a lot of great departments in there.
Yeah, I think that the best way for that to happen is for students to take courses in another department. And of
Mhm.
course, that is what they do. That's how they use their electives. Um, I think that it's really department specific how people who aren't enrolled in courses can utilize um, space and facilities and equipment, et cetera. And usually, sort of being in a course and establishing a relationship with faculty and techs really helps. But it really depends on the department.
Sure.
But there is a lot of electives included in the curriculum, and so there is a lot of opportunities to take courses in other departments.
Excellent. We did get a couple questions. One asking how many people are going to be in the upcoming cohort. If you can speak to that?
Sure. So J&M has currently 5 second-year students who will be graduating and 5 first-year students, and so we will be offering admission to 5 incoming students, and that is our cohort is 10
Excellent.
maximum. Yeah.
Awesome. And then we did get a question about the post-bac program, if you can go more into
Mhm.
that.
Sure, I can say more about it. I would say that really the focus of the post-bac is about like building technical skills alongside maybe if a student is interested, like getting more experience in terms of like talking about their work, research, writing about their work. So it really depends on the interests of the student and the need of the student. And if a person comes as a post-bac, it's very collaborative with me and the department head in terms of like what courses you're able to take, what's going to best support your growth. I think that it's good to point out that J&M in terms of like bench space has like, maximums because there's only a certain amount of benches. So there might be a time because of enrollment where a certain course can't be taken by a post-bac, but that doesn't typically happen. But it's good to just point out that it might happen based on like we don't know how many students we're going to have basically. And J&M is like always almost full or always full. So um, it's just something to consider.
Excellent. Yeah, we got a question about how often graduates go into teaching after graduation.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very good question. I think that like RISD is in particular is positioned as an institution that trains teachers,
Mm.
and that is like reflected in how many of our alumni are in full-time teaching positions or get full-time teaching positions, also like part-time teaching. And so I would say that like in the last 4 years, immediately after graduating, at least one of the grads who's graduating was placed as a full-time um, teacher in a term position, so for a year. And for example, Valerie, who graduated in 2024, she went directly to the University of Idaho for a year term, and then now is at the University of Oregon for a year term. So we do offer tons of support in terms of teaching, and as I pointed out, there's a certificate for teaching and collegiate teaching at RISD that is part of what many of the students who end up teaching do. I do want to say that like the other ways or things that people do after graduate school are industry. We're close to New York. Many of our undergrads go directly to industry as well as grads, and so that's a fairly common way that people leave this place and go into the professional realm. Um, and then, artist assistants, starting production companies or fine jewelry companies, or just like studio practices alongside related employment, or maybe not related employment. It's really just a huge range.
Yeah. Um, we have a two-part question. One kind of segues into what you're talking about, after graduation. What are the typical, well, you started talking about the typical career paths of graduates. Um, and actually, it's a three-part question. So you did talk about that, but also, do you have any guidance or any tips for international applicants? I guess I would say
Yeah,
for any of our applicants, but yeah, we'll
yeah,
start with that.
yeah. I see the questions. Well,
Yeah, there we
I'll answer the first one. Um, so in terms of stonework, we have a wet grinding machine that has various wheels for grinding. We have a wet saw for cutting stone or other materials. We have a flat sanding machine. Um, we are looking, I did a residency at Ida Oberstein in Germany, which is like a program that's really focused on stone carving. And I did that in 2024. And so I'm working to get like a piece of equipment that's more flexible in terms of stone carving. And it's something that I do in my own work. So I think that the department is interested in expanding our tool selection for stonework. Guidance in terms of international applicants. If you're still there, Ella Food, is there specific things that you want to hear about? I think that
We can
some,
also, I'll chime in there too and say like,
yeah,
I'm going to put in the email for admissions, and we can also help to guide, of course, through any
yeah,
part of the application process.
yeah,
Absolutely. But let me not let you interrupt. Sorry about
yeah,
that.
no, no worries. Um, I will say that I'll just give some general tips for like the application in general. I think that like the if you go to the RISD website, each department lists like pretty specific application requirements, and J&M gives very specific application requirements, and oftentimes people don't look at those. And I think that like it's very important that you do because they're meant to support like a strong application. One thing that's important to understand is like when we're viewing your application, it's online and it's in a portal where we can't project it or make it bigger. So we can only see your work on our screen. And if you put 40 images on one slide, we can't see anything. So one of our suggestions in our application is that you don't put more than 3 images in one slide, for example. Um, I think that like oftentimes people overload their applications with process. I think it's good to understand maybe in one piece what your process is, but other than that, we want to see like finished resolved work and a body of work so that we can understand how you think about things, how you articulate them in material and process, and how they engage with the body and what that means. Um, I think the Office of International Student Services is for international students as and is meant to support international students. So there's tons of resources there if there's like specific questions that you need. Um, I think that it's probably good to point out that currently we have 2 national students and 8 international students. So J&M is typically um, full of international students. Right now we have students from Australia, Korea, China, and the US. And that really fluctuates, but we always have a majority of international students.
Excellent. Thank you. That was wonderful. And I just put a link for the graduate application requirements. As Seth said, if you go into the portfolio tab, as you'll see like all the application requirements. And if you open the portfolio tab, it does list jewelry and metalsmithing and gives more specifics. So as you're advising, make sure
Perfect.
to do that, everyone. Yeah, and I mean, unless I want to talk more about like typical career, other examples of career paths and stuff, which is as well, that would be great. And
Yeah,
we have another question too. So
let me get this other one.
yeah, I know what you meant. The work generated should reference a body during graduate studies, but is it fine to have sculptural work in the application portfolio?
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Tyler, for the question because it's good. I think that sometimes people apply to the department who don't have a background in jewelry and metalsmithing, but are interested in how their work can evolve within like the context of jewelry and metalsmithing. And so I think that like for applicants whose background is not coming from J&M, really the letter that's required in the application is where you can place effort and emphasis on articulating how going into a graduate program that's jewelry and metalsmithing focused will support your interests and the evolution of your work, and how the skills you already have will support your transition into a totally different field. Um, I think it's good to point out that graduate students, we expect graduate students to come here and be able to make things.
Mhm.
And that means that you're able to articulate your ideas and interests in like material and form. That might not be like with a jewelry skill set, but we expect that you're able to do that in a way that like shows intention and clarity. Of course, part of what you're going to learn here is like how to improve that intention and clarity and its presence in like the tangible aspects of your work. But there's also opportunities through your electives to take courses in JNM if there are specific skills that you're interested in relation to your work, like stones and gold, like electroforming. Um, it's possible to take like a junior level CAD class if you're interested in learning um, 3D rendering and 3D printing. So it's really the place to articulate like why you're making a huge shift if your work is not based in jewelry and metalsmithing is really in your letter. And what we want to see in your work is your ability to articulate your ideas and interests and intentions and material and form in a way that like is personally expressive and that shows like some confidence across like a body of work. When I say a body of work, that might be like 5 pieces from one body and 5 pieces from another. It doesn't have to be just one body of work, but I think what we don't want to understand is that you're showing us work from assignments. I think it's important that in your portfolio you're showing like your ability to sort of motivate your thinking and your making across a body of work as opposed to needing an assignment to do that.
Excellent. That was great. That was really very well said. Oh, are there more international applicants than stateside? How many applications do you typically receive a year for 5? That's something that, oh, I wish I could remember off the top of my head statistics, but you're welcome to reach out to us in admissions and we can get you, I'll put that our email again in the chat, but we can
Yeah.
get you more of those numbers.
I mean, I'm of course I'm not going to answer that question, but I will say that I will say that every year it's very different.
Right. Yeah.
So it just depends. But I will say that RISD is an extremely competitive institution to get into, and so it's always very competitive.
Yeah. Um, Excellent. We have a little bit more time. So if anybody has any other questions, these have all been really great. This information has been fantastic. And Seth, I also put your RISD email in our chat box, the main chat box too. So if anybody does have questions afterwards, definitely reach out.
Yes, please do.
All right, well, I do want to be mindful of everyone's time. So if there aren't any other questions, oh, there we go. Can you explain more what theoretical demands occur in the seminar classes? Good question,
Yes.
Tyler.
Yeah, so I think it really depends on where you are in the program. I think the seminar courses are structured so that, for example, first years who are coming into their first term in the fall, they're in seminar with the second year students who are in the first term of their second year. And typically the in the fall of your first year, that first seminar course is really about building an understanding around like how research, and when I say research, I mean like textual material, um, experiential, etc. The various kinds of research that exist inform how you're thinking about something and what you want to say about it, and how that is like being manifested in your work. Um, of course, like an aspect of that is like having sort of a baseline understanding of like the field of jewelry and metalsmithing, so that you can make informed decisions about like formal material choices. Historical reference is typically something that always occurs in work that happens in the department. So that's always sort of like part of the general conversation in seminars about like jewelry and its function and role across the world in various ways. But also, it can be broader discussions around like craft, around sustainability, et cetera. It really just depends on who's teaching that course and the interest of the students. Um, and so I would say that like the seminars throughout the term just build on um, that structure. And at the end, basically the last term seminar, you're like composing and finalizing your thesis document. So seminar really just builds from the beginning to the end in terms of like how you're articulating your research, your interests, your thoughts, um, and what you want to say in through writing and reading and presenting. So that's sort of an overview of seminar.
Um, Fantastic.
Mm,
Do all of your students complete the program in 2 years?
yes. I mean, yeah, it is a good question because maybe it's that obvious. Yeah, I mean, it is a 2-year program and it has to be completed in 2 years. I think that like 2 years
And
doesn't
welcome to
seem like a long time, but it is enough time. And as I said, there's like tons of support from faculty, um, and the curriculum is designed to support you to be able to like feel confident leaving here in 2 years about what you're doing, about being able to sustain and motivate your own practice, um, and also like think about sort of like entering the professional realm. Professionalism is something that's like integrated in the program the minute you step foot in here. So we're not only thinking about you as artists, we're thinking about you as professionals. Um, and so all of that is like integrated and happens in 2 years. It seems like a lot, but it's designed thoughtfully to support all the students to be able to achieve that in 2 years, and that is what happens.
Um, Apologies for any noise that happened while you were
No
talking.
worries.
I do want to also shout out, we have, of course, all this week, we had some really helpful, meant to be very helpful and informative, graduate open house, webinars. And just to kind of circle back to just guidance providing for international applicants, we have done an international Q&A, that if it's not on our posted yet on our RISD YouTube channel. It will be, so forgive me. I'm like multitasking left and right, but just wanted to shout that out too. So there's some more, of course, resources for you all. All right. Any other questions? We have about. Say we have to wrap up in about 10 minutes, but again, I can be mindful of everyone's time if you don't have more questions.
So I'll just say, oh, here we go.
There we go. Should your graduate assistant
No,
questions,
yeah.
we reach out to admissions.
Yeah, so graduate assistantships are decided by me or whoever is in the position of GPD and JNM. And that those positions, of course, we correspond with admitted students about their interests in terms of like what skills they would want to build as they're here in assistantship positions, if they're interested in teaching, if they're not comfortable yet in that position and maybe could gain some comfort being a TA, if they really want to gain skills in terms of like tech skills. So that's like a collaborative conversation in terms of like what you need and what's available and how we can place you. I think, of course, those assistantships are like spread across 10 people. But you also have 2 years to be placed in various positions. So you can actually gain a lot of skills through those assistantships, and it's just a dialogue that you have with the GPD in terms of like where you want to be placed and where you can be placed.
Excellent. I will be saying, okay, I'm saying everything. Seth, unless there's more questions, you've said so many incredible, helpful things. I think it's also so incredibly helpful to put a face to a name and just make that
Yeah,
connection. Um,
yeah.
before we wrap this up, do you have any, again, even though you've already said such inspiring things, anything that you would just, any words of wisdom that you'd like to leave our applicants on?
Yeah. What is it though?
I know, but
I
I
think
put
that
you on the
like
spot more.
I mean, I guess I'll just reiterate that if you have specific questions, like please don't hesitate to
Yeah.
email me and ask me. I'm very happy to answer them. I think that like often those questions are like about portfolio and application. And I think that like I can't give specific tips on portfolios. I can't look at what you have and like tell you how to make it better. And so really the suggestions from our department in terms of application that Marin put in the chat, like really go through those and make sure you understand them and just follow them. They're designed and written to make sure that you have the strongest application you can. If you have questions about like the department, funding, curriculum, those kind of questions, of course, reach out to me. Um, I'm happy to answer those questions. And I would say that you never know until you try. So if you're like, oh, my work's not strong enough, I can't afford it, um, you know, this or that, like you don't know until you try. So I just encourage you to submit your application and see what happens. Part of the application process, a very important part, is like an interview. We interview all the candidates that we think can be successful in the department. And that's a huge part of the application is understanding who you are and how what you're interested in and how you can fit into the cohort that we're putting together because that's a very thoughtful process that we really think about like the group as a whole. It's not about just getting the best students, it's about building like a really strong cohort.
That's awesome.
So good luck with your applications. Don't hesitate to reach out to me.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much, Seth. Thank you all
Thanks,
for
Marin.
being here. Have a wonderful rest of your day, everyone.
Bye, everyone.